In the ancient, mystical land of Egypt, there was a time before the rise of the pharaohs and the construction of the colossal pyramids, when gods walked among men and ruled over the divine earth. Egypt was a fertile land, nourished by the life-giving waters of the Nile, and the gods had blessed it with wisdom, justice, and abundance. Chief among these divine beings was Osiris, a benevolent king and demigod who ruled Egypt with unrivaled wisdom and fairness. His reign was a symbol of peace, prosperity, and harmony, bringing civilization and order to a land that was once wild and untamed. But with every tale of greatness, shadows of jealousy, betrayal, and tragedy also follow. The story of Osiris is one such tale, a tale of love and loss, betrayal and revenge, death and resurrection, and the eternal struggle between order and chaos. Legends in the Shadows channel, I welcome you. Do like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's move forward in the video. Osiris was not just a king among men, but he was a god of immense power and importance. He was the son of Nut, the sky goddess, and Geb, the earth god. From his divine birth, Osiris was destined to bring order to the world, establish justice and law, and ensure that the people of Egypt could prosper under his rule. His rule enriched the civilization. People learned to cultivate the land, grow crops, and harness the gifts of the Nile. Under Osiris, Egypt became a center of education, culture, and spirituality, a beacon of light in the ancient world. Next to Osiris stood his beloved wife and queen Isis. She was as wise and powerful as she was beautiful, a goddess of magic and fertility who complemented Osiris in every way. Together, they were the embodiment of divine balance, Osiris, the king who brought life and order to the world, and Isis, the queen who nurtured and protected that life. Their love was legendary, a bond that transcended the earthly realm and resonated throughout the universe. However, hidden in the shadow of Osiris' greatness was his brother Seth, the god of chaos, violence, and the desert. Seth was the epitome of disorder, and he despised everything that Osiris represented. While Osiris brought fertility and civilization, Seth thrived in barren wastelands and the destructive forces of nature. Seth's jealousy of his brother grew with each passing year, and his envy soon turned to hatred. He could not see Egypt flourish under Osiris' rule, nor could he tolerate losing sight of his brother's success and the people's love for him. As Seth's resentment grew, he began to devise a plan to overthrow Osiris and take the throne for himself. Seth's mind was as dark as it was cunning, and he knew that if he was to succeed, he would have to be patient and careful in his plotting. He waited for the right moment, gathered his loyal followers, and prepared his treacherous plan. When the time was right, Seth set his plan in motion. The Golden Age of Osiris. Before Seth's betrayal, Egypt had experienced a golden age under the rule of Osiris and Isis. Osiris, with his wisdom, had taught the people the secrets of agriculture, showing them how to farm the fertile lands along the Nile. Under his guidance, the Egyptians learned to plant seeds, tend their crops, and harvest their bountiful harvests. Osiris introduced them to the art of winemaking and beer-making, which brought sustenance and happiness to the people. He also established laws and governance, ensuring that justice prevailed and peace prevailed throughout the land. The Egyptians worshipped Osiris, for he was not a distant or vindictive god, but rather he walked among them, guiding them with kindness and fairness. Temples were built in his honor, and festivals were held to celebrate the blessings he bestowed upon the land. Egypt prospered under his rule, becoming a land of abundance, culture, and learning. The Nile flooded every year, bringing life-giving silt to the fields, and the people worshipped Osiris because he was the god who granted them this boon. Besides him, Isis was worshipped as the goddess of fertility, motherhood, and magic. She was revered not only for her beauty, but also for her wisdom and power. It was said that Isis' magic was unrivaled. She knew the secret names of the gods, and her knowledge of divine mysteries allowed her to perform feats of wonder and awe. She was the protector of the weak, the nurturer of the living, and the guide of the dead. Together, Osiris and Isis ruled Egypt with love and compassion, their reign a shining example of harmony and prosperity. Yet, as the Egyptians prospered, Seth's heart grew more and more sad. He watched with envy how Osiris and Isis were worshipped, and how the land prospered under their rule. In the desolate desert, Seth continued to ponder his perceived injustice. He believed that he too deserved the throne, that he was not being given the power and honor he should have received. His bitterness turned to anger, and in that anger, he hatched a plot so devious that it would change Egypt's fate forever. Seth's treacherous plot. Seth knew that if he was to hold on to the throne, he would have to eliminate Osiris. However, he also knew that Osiris was beloved by both gods and people, and a direct attack would likely lead to his own downfall. Instead, Seth decided to use cunning and deceit, knowing that treachery from the inside would be far more effective than battle from the outside. To this end, Seth organized a grand banquet, inviting Osiris, Isis, and all the gods of Egypt. The banquet was a lavish affair, featuring music, dancing, and the finest food and drink available in Egypt. Seth made sure everything was perfect, so that no one would suspect his true intentions. Osiris, ever trusting, accepted the invitation, unaware that his own brother was plotting his death. During the feast, Seth unveiled a magnificent chest, made of cedar wood and adorned with gold, ivory, and precious gems. It was a work of art, and it immediately captured the attention of all who saw it. Pretending to be generous and playful, Seth announced that he would give the chest to anyone who could fit perfectly inside it. Curiously, the gods took turns trying to fit into the chest, but none succeeded. The chest had been carefully crafted for just one person, Osiris. When it was Osiris's turn, Seth asked him to try. Osiris had no reason to doubt his brother, so he lay down in the chest. As soon as Osiris went inside, Seth's true plan was revealed. With the help of his followers, Seth forced the lid shut and sealed it tightly with molten lead, trapping Osiris inside. Osiris, the great king of Egypt, was now a prisoner within the ark, unable to escape. Seth and his companions quickly carried the ark to the Nile River and threw it into the river. The current swept the ark away, and with it Osiris disappeared from the living world. With Osiris gone, Seth usurped the throne and declared himself king of Egypt. But Seth's reign was not one of peace and prosperity. Instead, chaos descended upon the country. The Nile stopped flooding, crops withered and died, and famine spread throughout Egypt. The people who had once been happy under Osiris' rule now suffered under Seth's tyranny. But despite Seth's apparent victory, Osiris' story was not over yet. Isis searched for Osiris. The news of Osiris' disappearance reached Isis, and her heart was filled with grief. She could not accept that her beloved husband was gone and vowed to find him, no matter what the cost. Driven by her love for Osiris and her determination to return him to his rightful place, Isis set out on a long and dangerous journey across Egypt in search of the chest that held Osiris' body. Isis' search took her to the farthest reaches of the land. She traveled through scorching deserts, dangerous mountains, and the banks of the Nile River, using her magic and wisdom to guide herself. She called on the spirits of the land, beings of the earth and sky to aid her in her quest. But despite her efforts, Osiris remained lost and Isis began to lose hope. During this period of despair, Isis received a message from the gods, which led her to the distant land of Byblos. There, she learned that the chest containing Osiris' body had washed ashore and been taken to the palace of the king of Byblos. The chest had become part of a large pillar supporting the palace roof, and it seemed as if it was forever out of her reach. But Isis was not one to be easily deterred. She disguised herself as a humble nurse and entered the palace, where she befriended the queen of Byblos. Her gentle nature and her skill with magic quickly won her the queen's trust, and soon the queen confided in her the secret of the chest. Moved by Isis' story of love and loss, the queen allowed her to retrieve the chest from within the pillar. Very carefully, Isis picked up the chest and returned to Egypt. She opened it and saw that it contained the body of Osiris. Although her heart was heavy with grief, Isis knew her journey was not over yet. She believed that with her magic she could bring Osiris back to life. Isis, with the help of her sister Nephthys and the jackal-headed god Anub, performed the ancient and sacred rituals necessary to bring Osiris to life. They carefully wrapped his body in linen bandages to prepare him for his journey to the afterlife. Isis used her magic to breathe life back into Osiris, calling upon the gods and forces of the universe to aid her in her task. After several days of rituals and incantations, Osiris stirred. Although he was dead, he was not truly lost. Isis succeeded in bringing him back, but the resurrection was incomplete. Osiris could not return to the world of the living in his former state. Instead, he was transformed into a god of the underworld, ruler of the Duat, the realm of the dead. Despite his resurrection, Osiris could not live among the living. His role now was to preside over the dead, judging the souls of those who had passed from the mortal realm. He would weigh their hearts against the Feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and justice. Those whose hearts were pure would be allowed to pass on to the afterlife, where they would live in peace for eternity. Those whose hearts were weighed down by sin would be swallowed up by the sleeting demon Ammit and cease to exist. Isis mourned for Osiris, but was comforted by the fact that he would continue to play an important role in the universe. His death had not been in vain, and his new position as Lord of the Underworld ensured that justice and balance would be maintained in both the worlds of the living and the dead. The birth of Horus and the struggle for Egypt. Although Osiris could no longer rule the living, the legacy of his rule would continue. Shortly after Osiris' resurrection, Isis gave birth to their son Horus. Horus was to avenge his father's death and reclaim the throne of Egypt from Seth. He was born the god of kingship and the sky with a falcon on his head, symbolizing his connection to the heavens and his divine right to rule. Isis knew the danger Horus faced, so she hid him in the marshes of the Nile Delta, far from Seth's reach. There, she raised him in secret, teaching him magic, wisdom, and the ways of war. Horus grew strong under his mother's care, and as he grew older he realized the time had come to confront his uncle and restore his father's legacy. The battle between Horus and Seth was long and brutal, a conflict that shook the foundations of earth and sky. Horus, the god of order and just kingship, clashed with Seth, the god of chaos and destruction. The two forces were on equal footing, and their battles stretched across the desert, mountains, and the Nile. Neither could gain the upper hand, and the war between them continued for years. During one of their many battles, Seth dealt a severe blow to Horus, causing him to lose one of his eyes. This eye, the Eye of Horus, became a powerful symbol in Egyptian mythology, representing healing, protection, and the restoration of order. Despite the injury, Horus recovered with the help of the god Thoth, who used his wisdom and magic to heal Horus' eye. The gods themselves witnessed the struggle between Horus and Seth, and eventually they decided it was time to intervene. They convened a divine tribunal where both Horus and Seth staked their claim to the throne of Egypt. After much deliberation, the gods ruled in favor of Horus, declaring him the rightful heir to the throne. Seth was defeated and exiled to the desert, where his chaotic influence would remain confined to the barren wasteland. After Seth's defeat, Horus ascended the throne of Egypt and restored order and balance to the country. The people rejoiced, because under Horus' rule, the land prospered once again. The Nile flooded again, crops grew well, and the people prospered just as they had under Osiris. Osiris, Lord of the underworld. Although Osiris was avenged, his destiny was still tied to the underworld. As ruler of the Duat, Osiris presided over the dead, ensuring that the souls of the dead were judged fairly and that justice was upheld in the afterlife. His role was to weigh the hearts of the dead with the Feather of Maat, determining whether they had lived virtuous lives. Osiris' position as Lord of the Underworld made him one of the most important gods in the Egyptian pantheon. His story of death and resurrection became a central theme in Egyptian religion, symbolizing the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Osiris' journey from life to death and back again reflects the natural cycles of the world, especially the annual flooding of the Nile River, which brings life to the land each year. Egyptians worshipped Osiris as the god who ensured the continued existence of the afterlife. His story gave them hope that death was not the end, but merely a transition to a new phase of existence. They believed that if they lived according to the principles of Maat, truth, justice and balance, Osiris would judge them and grant them eternal life in the afterlife. Temples were built in Osiris' honor, and rituals were performed to ensure the safe passage of souls into the afterlife. Priests of Osiris played an important role in Egyptian society, acting as intermediaries between the living and the dead, performing funeral rites and preserving stories of Osiris' resurrection. The legacy of Osiris. The story of Osiris left an indelible mark on Egyptian religion and culture, influencing their beliefs about life, death, and the afterlife for thousands of years. The myth of Osiris, Isis and Horus became a cornerstone of Egyptian spirituality, and their divine family was worshipped throughout the country. One of the most important rituals associated with Osiris was the Festival of Osiris, celebrated each year during the flooding of the Nile. This festival was a time of mourning and celebration, as people reenacted Osiris' death and resurrection. They mourned his death and burial in a tomb, which symbolized the death of crops during the dry season, and then celebrated his resurrection, which represented the renewal of life brought by the floodwaters of the Nile. Egyptian pharaohs, who were considered living gods, identified themselves with Horus during their lifetime and with Osiris after death. After their death, pharaohs believed they would become one with Osiris and take their place as ruler of the afterlife. Their successors would then take on the role of Horus and continue the divine cycle of kingship and renewal. The story of Osiris also had a profound influence on Egyptian art and architecture. His temples were decorated with scenes of his death, resurrection, and judgment of the dead, and his image was often depicted in tombs to ensure the deceased's safe passage to the afterlife. The symbol of the Eye of Horus became one of the most recognizable and powerful symbols in Egyptian culture, representing protection, healing, and the triumph of order over chaos. Over time, the story of Osiris spread beyond the borders of Egypt, influencing the religious beliefs of other cultures in the ancient world. His story of resurrection and eternal life resonated with people across the Mediterranean, and elements of his myth can be found in the religious practices of the Greeks, Romans, and other ancient civilizations.